Oh, God, there's been a lot of women, haven't there?
Yes, there is.
I'm surprised, I guess, some days that I haven't been cancelled. I was riding down the street and I remember these tears just like falling down my face because I've been around. I've done these stories and the first half an hour is crucial, right? It's a miracle that people go beyond 3 years. We did 10 years. So as far as I'm concerned, some marriages don't last that long. And that was painful because I felt I genuinely felt that it was my fault.
Karl Stefanovic, welcome to the Stellar Podcast.
So nice to be on. Big fan, long time listener. First time here in the hot seat.
First time caller.
I'm very nervous, Sarah.
Oh, you are. Why would you be nervous? Is there anyone in Australia that's got more hours of live TV under their belt than you?
I don't know. I was trying to work it out the other day, and I think it's like tens of thousands of hours. So probably David Koch.
Yes.
You know, and his record will never get beaten, I don't think, in terms of duration and success. I really admire him, actually.
Thank you.
What are you doing?
Just Carl and I are texting.
Oh, no. Focus on the task at hand.
I asked whether he got a bet on the sports bet book on me crying or not on the show, and he said, no, my missus closed my account last year when I bet on the camel races in Dubai.
But it's a long time and it's a lot of hours. It's a frequent flyer program of its own.
And on days when there's breaking news,
Yeah.
you can sometimes be there on air for the better part of half a day.
So just in the last couple of weeks, we had the presidential inauguration. That was 7 hours. Last year was my longest broadcast, from 5 a.m. in Washington, D.C., to 7 p.m. back home in Queensland. So 14 hours, it's a long haul. But, I love those kind of big days. And this job's given me a front row seat to big moments in history. And that's such a privilege. And the way I work is that I like to sink myself into a long broadcast, and you don't get that many opportunities. That's the reality of it. So, and that's why I still love doing it. Otherwise, it'd be tough.
Well, otherwise you wouldn't be here 20 years on. And it has been 20 years on because it was actually February 14, 2005 that you joined the Today Show as co-host. What are your memories of that first morning? Tracy Grimshaw was sitting alongside you as co-host. What do you remember of that day on set?
So all I remember is that I was due to come back from the LA Bureau. So I'm all of 30. I don't really know that much. I've done, a couple of years in LA doing the foreign correspondent job. And I got a call from David Gingell to say, you're coming back to Australia. We need you to do 60 Minutes. That is the primo gig, in the world, because the Australian 60 Minutes is such a terrific show. I'm like cock a hoop. I don't even ask for a contract. I fly the family back and we get back to Sydney and I'm like, oh, I am the next George Negus. Here we go, full of myself. But then a week later, Steve Liebman had a heart attack and was really ill and decided that was it for him. And Ginge called me and he goes, you are going to do the Today Show. And I said, huh? Are you serious? There's just what? I'm going from the world's best, safest gig to the riskiest, most difficult live gig in Australia. No worries, big fella. I was like, why did I get a contract before I left LA? But I always had a thing for live TV, and I always like biting off more than I can chew. And day one came and I wasn't overly nervous. I just knew I didn't know enough. So at 30, going on 31, you start out and it's like, I can do the mechanics of the show, but the rest of it is really hard. Just a normal conversation in front of the camera is particularly hard to learn to do unless you're a natural talker, and to go into the furnace and to have the attention where every word is being looked at is a transition. You know, I'd never had that. I had it in live crosses, but it was
Yes.
all news oriented.
Well, few people would have it at the level that you would have been exposed to on breakfast TV.
Yeah, it's the basic conversations with Tracy. Tracy's a seasoned professional, and she was so lovely and so formidable. I just thought on day one, oh man, I am so out of my depth. Like, this is going to be a bumpy ride, and I wasn't wrong.
When did you start to feel then a bit more comfortable and realise that you weren't out of your depth?
There were elements of the show that I knew I could do. I knew I could do an interview. I knew I could do hard news. I knew I could, be comfortable live. But it was just the conversations that we're having now when you're on TV with a lot of cameras and you're aware of an audience that's watching. It's not natural. So it was some time, and that was a particularly big year. Tracy left at the end of it. I remember she came into me, and I was late for work because I left my shoes at home. It was this crazy story, but I ended up getting Ray Martin's shoes, and I had Ray Martin shoes on. And so I was sitting in the studio, and I came in like, "Hey, Trace, hey, look at this. I've got Ray Martin's shoes." And Tracy leans across and goes, "You got his shoes. I got his job."
Oh, good line,
That's how she
Tracy.
broke it to me. She denies that story, but it 100% happened.
Oh, no, she should own that story. That's a great story.
She was fantastic. She also told me a couple of times, which I'll never forget, she leaned across one day when I was asking about an interview, and she said, "Can you stop being so needy?" And it was a great lesson for me because I didn't feel like I was, but it's a tough business, and you've got to get it, and you've got to know the parameters of it, and you've got to be self-sustained. You can't rely on anyone else. So that was fantastic, particularly when she just deserted me, and I cried.
Yeah, who's needy now?
No, I just, I was at the time, Tracy was going to a current affair. So it was like, and then Jess came in, and, Jess was such a light, and she just got pilloried in the media. It was shocking. It was really shocking. The treatment that she had. I mean, she was called the most heinous things in newspapers. So she wasn't just dealing with the early mornings and getting her head around a big job. In the media, she was really pilloried, and called the most heinous things. And that, at the time, I was just trying to survive myself, and I was like, oh, this poor girl. And I apologized to Jess since then, but at the time, I just didn't know how to navigate my own future, let alone be there for her in the way that I should have been. And by the end of that period with Jess, she left, and then we had Sarah Murdoch come in, and that's when I started to feel like, I was the senior partner. Sarah Murdoch, hang on, Sarah Murdoch's doing the Today Show. It was like, we were getting, pummeled in the ratings, but Sarah came along and was like, okay, if Sarah Murdoch wants to do the show, maybe we're going to be okay.
We're doing something right, exactly.
And she was so beautiful, and she just took it all on. And it says a lot about her. I mean, she was supposed to stay for a week. She stayed for, I think, a couple of months, if I recall. And she was just absolutely brilliant. But by the end of that, I was starting to feel like I was on top of my game.
So it took a good couple of years then till you really lost that. Do you go, obviously with the 20th anniversary, I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of looking back over some of the most memorable moments over the last 2 decades. But for you personally, do you ever go back and look at some of those moments, like the first day on set, some of those interviews where maybe a co-host was saying, stop being so needy? And if so, what do you think?
I've only just done that this year, since I got back, and day one they'd prepared this tape. They don't even call it tape now. I mean, all the kids out there who are producing are going, what is tape? Uncle Carlos, we don't have VHS anymore. But literally, I see the highlights. I've never looked back. I'm just not a look back kind of guy. In a strange way, I feel awkward looking back, and I just don't like looking at myself. So it is moments in big news events, and there have been many, and it's a great privilege to do that. I'm not going to say that I love being there for that, but that's the part of the job that I feel most responsibility for when there's a big event that I feel like I can articulate to Australian viewers. So, there's significant events in the past 20 years. I mean, you just, if you roll through them.
That's right. You've had a front row seat for all of them.
Yeah.
And did that, because when you got that call from Gingell saying, hey, it's not 60 Minutes, it's the Today Show, practically that's a lot to get your head around because there's a whole different time slot and not just any time slot. That's when you were introduced to the joys, I imagine, of setting your alarm for whatever ungodly hour of day that you get out. How were those first few years?
I think that you just sink yourself into it and you don't really try and do anything else other than survive it. From a physical point of view and a mental point of view, it's brutal. And even after 20 years, I've just, I've had a holiday, you come back and we're straight into 50 hours of TV in 2 weeks. The body adjusts, but I don't think the body adjusts in a great way. It's a real permanent jet lag, which I don't think is great for you. So I'm better at managing it now than I was. And I had a terrible day. I just get home and have 15 toasted sandwiches, have a 3-hour sleep, and live, a young person's lifestyle on the weekend and just send it and then try and show up for work on a Monday morning. And, back then it felt like I was okay to do that. But as you get older, and 20 years is a long time, the creaks start to, appear and, you got to get more control of it now than I ever did.
How do you do that then? You're obviously not going home and having the toasties and the 3-hour nap. What do you do?
Yeah, I eat really light now. I only have like a couple of eggs in the morning. I used to have 3 or 4 coffees. I now have 1. And I have a lemon and ginger tea first thing in the morning.
God, who even are you?
I haven't turned into a proper Byron Bay weirdo, I assure you.
Yeah, you're 1 cup of tea away from it.
Just during the week, says. But, I do have to kind of watch what I eat, and I have to get exercise as soon as I finish to clear the head as much as anything else. And I'm just better at the cycle now. So I will do a bunch of checks during any course of the day on different international websites, local websites, news websites, Instagram, TikTok. I'll pick out stuff during the course of the day rather than cramming it at 3 o'clock in the morning. I'll give myself 45 minutes more sleep than I used to. So it used to be 3 o'clock up. Now it's 3:45. I literally get out of bed with my pajamas on, get in the car, drive to work, and then
I've got PJs.
Yeah, and then I've got literally no shoes on. Like I'm a proper kid from Cairns, a proper bogan. But I sit down there, I'll read the newspapers. I've got Sky News on UK, and I've got it down to a really fine art. What I need to do in order to get prepared for the show. And if I'm prepared for a show, it means that I can be present in any given moment. And I think that's the most vital thing for me. I can't talk for anyone else. But if I'm prepared and I'm able to literally sink into the moment and be aware of the moments and allow myself to be in the moment, then I can create a broadcast that I think is hopefully interesting to the viewer.
And those news events and the breaking news that we've talked about, and obviously what would have been appealing about the 60 Minutes gig has clearly been satisfied through the work that you've done in that area on the Today Show. What about the lighter side of it?
Yeah.
Because there's obviously people talk about the nature of breakfast TV, the sheer hours that you're doing, but the depth of it. So one moment you could be interviewing the Prime Minister and then the next minute you're doing some crazy stunt where someone's dared you to eat like a chili pie and you're talking to the next person that's just been booted off maths the night before or whatever. When did you start to lean into that lighter side of it?
I think probably I've got an undiagnosed disorder. I don't mean that in too much of a frivolous way, but it's probably ADHD of some kind. I like
welcome.
I think there are a lot more of us than people think.
So.
But that certainly lends itself to Brekkie TV. It's I love light, the lighter side of life as well, and I like the balance. I've got better at the transitions. But, you know, at the end of the day, my job is to inform and it's to entertain, and I love doing that. People have shit lives, you know, and they go through an awful lot in their lives. People are going through stuff you can't imagine, and they tune in. People in hospitals have sent me messages saying they have cancer and they're dying, but you provide a lightness to my day. Now, that's a great honour, right? So whilst there might be criticism around it all, for me, it's a really important job, and I love it. I really love it. And over the years, I mean, God, we had some fun. Lisa and I had so much fun. And she taught me so much about what we were saying before about that transition, to be able to have a conversation on air. She was vital in all of that for me. Like, she was such a great friend, but such a great exponent of chit chat about anything. I mean, literally, I could sit down at a table with her for 4 days in front of a camera, and we could just chit chat. So she was an incredible influence for me in that regard. So, you know, along the way, learning to be able to do that, to be able to have a laugh and then transition into serious stuff when you need to, and for it not to jolt the audience, is partly a trust thing for the audience, but mostly it's the experience of, you know, of time that people have with you.
Absolutely. I mean, I have known you for 10 years. I'm a panellist on the Today Show, and I've seen breaking news develop and had to see you and your co-hosts just pivot, to use the dreaded COVID word, 5 years on, in a heartbeat. And I think it's an agility that is really something that only those flying hours on air could deliver. I don't think anyone could just come in and do that from day one.
Yeah, I think I'm really aware of how the show is looking too, and how it feels. It's probably my best skill is that I'm empathetic, and I've got this ability, and I want to feel what the audience is feeling. I want to climb into that. And that's why you'll forever see me. I'm always watching a monitor, because I'm watching what the audience is seeing. And if for whatever reason I feel like, you know, I might see something, if I'm connected and in the moment, oh, that's got to be interesting, I'll just pivot on it. Now, sometimes that'll be uncomfortable for the audience. And when I get it wrong, like, I have the worst sense of humor in the history of the world. Like, it's shocking. It's shocking to me that when I pivot sometimes and get it catastrophically wrong, how I've still got a job. I mean, it's just, it's like, I have such a bad sense of humor, but that's balanced, that terrible sense of humor, with the absolute stupidity to follow through on it.
That's right. You've got to be brave as well as have the sense of humour.
I think it's just, you know, I'll just jump in, because that part of my brain that's probably good at deciphering and communicating news, you know, when it's something funny, like Koshy, his favourite show being Bump, whatever that stupid gag was, I'll say it.
Yeah, yeah.
And there is a filter, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, hang on, we'll bugger it. You know, this'll give people a bit of a laugh. And at the end of the day, I do like, you know, the idea of making people laugh and feel something.
And it's that risk evaluation, isn't it? Because you know that there's a chance that this might be the joke, that there's going to be a flurry of headlines. Everyone on social media is going to go down into a meltdown and you'll be quote unquote cancelled. But then there's also all the jokes that create your persona and have contributed to this 20 years of doing that job.
I think Koshy loving bumps was one that I thought maybe I didn't need to say that. But then I got off stage and my wife just went, oh, that was terrible. And that actually made me laugh. And so this is how strange I am. Like, oh, that's... I think it made her...
that, right?
I think she liked it, even though she said it was horrendous.
So then at what point, if ever, did you think, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that?
It's like, if it happens, it happens. You know, I'm surprised, I guess, some days that I haven't been cancelled. But it is what it is. I hope that I don't offend people too often. And there's not ill will in any of it, ever. And if I have caused any hurt or harm, I will apologise.
You will,
and I've
you
just got it wrong.
And you have. And if there has been a time where you've caused offence and you really didn't realise that and you've become aware of that, you have then, and I use the word brave before, maybe a bit facetiously, but that genuinely that takes a strength of character and I think courage to say, I really didn't mean to cause offence, genuinely, not in the, PR written version of the apology, a genuine apology.
I think it's Peter Meakin said something like, if you're going to, F up, then F up quickly.
Yes.
And I think there's some validity to that. But we live in very different times now, even though there was, always newspaper criticism or radio criticism and then online criticism. Now I think it's getting more difficult. There are so many there's been a proliferation of alternate voices that have come through the media now. Legacy media, I think, attracts more of that attention because there are more voices. So it stands to reason that anyone in my position is probably more than likely going to need to have their hard hat at the ready more often. And you've got to have a thick skin. You've got to believe in what you're doing and, cry yourself to sleep and get up in the morning and go back to work, because there are people out there who legitimately get something out of it. And while I feel that, I'll keep doing it.
You were talking before about Jess, of course, being Jessica Rowe, your co-host, who joined in 2006. And as you said, there was so much unfair commentary and so much vitriol directed at her. A lot of it, I would like to think sometimes that level of cruelty we wouldn't see today. And then I think, well, actually social media and also mainstream media, maybe it would even be worse.
Yeah.
Having navigated that 20 years, just further to the point you were just making about this ever-present threat of quote unquote cancellation. What do you think? Do you think it's gotten better since what Jess went through?
I think Jess went through a form of media execution that was so public at the time when we didn't have, the keyboard warriors. And so in a way it was more embarrassing for her because it was, really well-known publications going to a lot of people, a lot of, industry people as well as the public, and that kind of thing's horrendous. I don't know whether it's the same as someone getting on your Instagram and having a go, but there are so many more avenues now for keyboard warriors to attack and to hide their identities. You have to choose to dance the dance or walk away. It's the reality of it, because I don't listen to any of it, in mainstream legacy media or on the internet, because it just doesn't affect me. I've built up, I've been through a fair few pylons and some by my own design, but you have to make the decision that something's not going to impact on the way you do the job. And if you can't, you can't. And there's no, I feel genuinely sorry. I mean, I see it happen almost every day. But for a lot of people, the first burn and the first cut is the deepest, and they won't recover. So, I think that would be the one thing these days that it's on such a big scale that, you have to be prepared for that, and you have to be ready for the decision on whether or not you're going to suck it up and get on with it, or it can have some brutal consequences. And I've been through a fair share of those. They don't worry me, but it's like, recently when Harper went missing on on the Sunshine Coast. This stuff happens, but there was a paparazzi there that day for whatever reasons, and that was captured, and that's part of my life, and I don't understand it. I mean, who wants to get a shot of a 50-year-old dude after, Christmas lunch coming out of the surf? By the way, they're beautiful shots. Shocking. But when something like that happens and someone gets it, that's fine. And my wife was very, very upset that day. But I also had my kids there, my older kids. And the paparazzi got shots of my older kids, and this is traumatic. We didn't know where Harper was. Traumatic for everyone because we feared the worst, honestly.
Of course.
And my daughter Ava came back from the beach and said, "Dad, there's a paparazzi getting shots of us," and they were in a real bind. And I think that stuff goes too far with family. But for me, I've got to accept that that's part of my life. And again, are you choosing to buy in, or you're getting out? And for the moment, that's where I am.
I was going to ask you about that time when you went on holidays, the beginning of your Christmas break, and Harper went missing. I think every parent knows that is the worst fear, is your child missing, and that awful window where you don't know where they are.
Yeah.
What, outside of that awful horror of the moment and then the media intrusion making it difficult and the impact on your family, did that shift your perspective on life as you came back to work and start your 20th year on air?
I think it doesn't shift my view. I don't, the intrusion aspect of it, that's part of the deal. I can't complain about that. Would I prefer my kids not to be photographed? Yes. But genuinely, when you have your child go missing, the police come and search the house. The police can't find her. And there's a beach, there's bushland. The police arrive. They've got dogs. They've got a chopper in the air. And you're being interviewed by police. It's like, and then my wife was so distraught because she thought her little one was, was gone. And I remember I got on a bike and I was riding down the street on my Vespa and I remember these tears just like falling down my face because I've been around. I've done these stories, and the first half an hour is crucial, right? And so I'm riding down the street, I'm crying, I get back, and my wife's like, she was so upset. And then my daughter comes running outside, and she goes, I found her. She's under the chair. Like, we had these covers on these chairs, and she's gone up under the chair and she's fallen asleep. And no, it was, so to go through those emotions and then the elation, it was like, and then you run into people at the pub, like 5 hours later at the pub, they're like, "Mate, did you look in the bloody house, you bloody idiot? What's wrong with you?" But then most people are like, God, most people have been through it.
Yes.
But
even for 2 minutes in a supermarket, it's the worst.
The good news is that I had the paparazzi there to record it forevermore. So when she turns 21,
you can add it to the slideshow.
No, exactly.
How are you all doing now? Because that is genuinely a traumatic experience to go through.
The moment a child is found, the moment the crisis is over.
Yeah.
And Peter Fitzsimons always said to me, back in the day, that you're only as happy as as your most unhappy child. And I think for us as a family, I had all my kids there, and to see them, genuinely, first of all so upset, but then really happy that Harper was okay. Was in the end a bonding experience. But that little girl, she is going to be problematic. I just feel the energy in her. I feel like she's a bit of a smart aleck. She genuinely loves causing dramas, and I don't know where she got it from.
I don't know where she got it from either. Must be her mum, do you think? It must be Jazz.
Yeah.
Because I can't think where it would be. No.
Yeah, and she doesn't. She's horrible looking, and terrible sense of humour, and I feel like I worry about her a lot.
Yeah. No, I see an interesting future for Harper. I will look forward to interviewing her in 50 years about her 20 years co-hosting
50 years,
a breakfast TV show. I know there's the thing. Well, you mentioned Peter Fitzsimons there, and you mentioned Lisa earlier, and you said you and Lisa Wilkinson, if you sat down, you could chat for 4 days, the time that you would have spent on air together, I'm not very good at maths like most journos, that I imagine would exceed well beyond 4 days. She was actually a longer serving co-host.
10
She
years.
was there for 10 years. It's nice to hear just you talking about her in that way, that you were these people that navigated that crazy world of those hours and all of those interviews and the things that went amazingly well and winning the ratings and then things going badly, and you both went through a lot in your personal lives during that 10 years. Obviously, literally books have been written about that dynamic.
Yeah.
When you look
I
back
see what you're
at
doing
the
there.
20 years, 20 years, what are your recollections of that partnership?
So, genuinely, as I get older, I don't want to waste any of my life thinking about, as much as I can, any negative parts of life when you've had a long time with someone. That's hard to do. But this is what I will say about Lisa. Genuinely adored working with her. I found her to be an incredibly interesting, intelligent, funny woman. Like I said, she taught me so much about the craft of conversation. And we had a really beautiful relationship. We did some terrific trips together around Australia. I remember dancing with her in New York, and live on air, and then going. Everyone went out to dinner and to a nightclub, and so for me, there is no ill will, and only great things came from that. I think at the end of the day, these on-air relationships, right? It's not normal. No, you get. I don't think you do, Sass.
No, well, I'm
No, you wake up at 3 a.m. You go to work. You see someone in only the way that their partner would, without makeup. That goes to the dudes as well. I've got my pajamas on, my Vegemite pajamas, and bare feet. It's not normal to have a conversation at that hour of the day. It's not normal to think and articulate a question to a prime minister at that day. It's not normal to sit next to someone and have a spirited argument with someone at that hour. It's a miracle that people go beyond 3 years. We did 10 years. So as far as I'm concerned, some marriages don't last that long. And for us to have gone 10 years, I think, woohoo to us. And I will compartmentalize that as a great period in my life, in all honesty.
And then after Lisa left, Georgie Gardner came on, and then a year later, after you and Jasmine got married at the end of 2018, you were actually stood down from the show for that 12 months. How was that time then, and how was it now when you look at it within the wider context of this 2 decades in the role?
I would say that it was painful to be let go from the show so soon after my wedding. It was like a couple of days. And that's something that I'll hold on to. I remember there was a shot at the wedding of everyone, including some of my family members, who were let go not long after. And that was painful because I felt I genuinely felt that it was my fault. And at the end of the day, all I was doing was getting married. I was in love, and I just didn't feel like we did anything wrong. But whatever happened and decisions that were made led to that. And I've made my apologies, but it was a really difficult time. But then not long after that, I got to have a year off with Jasmine. I got to do 15, terrific trips inside Australia with my new, partner, wife, and we got to actually spend time together, which was a gift. And I got to rebuild myself in the way that I wanted to, to come back into the work environment. And, there are some things that, that I learned from that. But at the end of the day, I want to do it my way, and I will do it my way. And that year off basically, taught me that if you're prepared to do that, then cop whatever you need to cop, but be resolute in that pursuit, because there's no other way. There's just no other way.
It was definitely tested at that time.
Yeah.
And a big challenge also for a new marriage. Then in 2020...
I marvel at her. I mean, just on that. I mean, she's such a strong woman. She did not... I mean, there was never a crossover between, my previous marriage and none of that's easy to talk about, but there was never a crossover. I never anticipate that I would fall in love, 6 months after, a tragic marriage breakdown, but it happened. It's me. Here I am. I'm just going to try and roll on. But her strength, I mean, her funniest thing she ever says to me, and the thing she most says to me is, when there's paparazzi around, oh, you're not Brad Pitt, what's wrong with you? But for me, she's dealt with a lot, and there's a lot of stuff that people don't see and wouldn't be aware of, that she handles with grace and humor, and I doubt I'd be here without her.
Has it gotten easier for her then, Karl? You've been married now for 6 years.
That's a big NO, Daddy-O. She doesn't like that. She hates the... I know it's going to sound funny, but she literally is a woman who... She gets so nervous in front of people. She was a model, yes, but she doesn't like being in front of the camera. She won't do interviews. She really kind of... she knows I'm in the game, and she's a great consumer of media, but she don't want to be in it. So it'll be rare to ever see her. And that's kind of nice, and it's nice for me,
But do you feel that some of that vitriol and that judgment that you in particular were navigating when your marriage ended, and there was so much scrutiny, you and I sat down for a big sit-down interview in July 2017, you at that point were the most hounded man in the country. Some days you may still feel like you are. And then, Jasmine, then definitely you talked earlier about how your marriage, there were other people in the family that became collateral damage. And as you say, then Jasmine got caught up in that narrative too. But I, as an observer, would have thought that then being married, you've been married for 6 years, you have your beautiful daughter Harper, a lot of that assumptions and people thinking they know what's going on here and making, easy jibes, I would have thought that some of that has evaporated and there's more goodwill towards you as a couple and by extension for her.
I think we just don't buy into it now. We're in a position where we don't have to, we're not getting hammered every day by it all. It's now more a surprise, an aberration that someone is there taking photographs. So the heat's come out of it, and that's a good thing. I mean, God, when it's on, you've got... I guarantee you, if a paparazzi followed anyone in the general public around every day for a year, they're going to find some shit. Well, they did for me for like 3 or 4 years, and it definitely has an impact. But now we're in, it's such a lovely life, and I'm so grateful for, everything, even the pain I've learned a lot out of, the challenges I've learned a lot out of. And I'm just a dude who loves doing what he's doing and loves his family. And even this last trip in Noosa was, with all the kids around, and, it's wonderful. It's not to say that there aren't things going on all the time, and there aren't significant things, but, I feel very, very grateful. I mean, this is the thing about 20 years in TV, right? The hardest thing about the Today Show is not the show. It's the life in between, and what you can handle, what you can take, to be able to muscle into the show because you feel like you have an obligation to, and dealing with life outside of it, but be able to show up is very, very difficult sometimes. Are you man or woman enough to do it? And if you can't, you can't. But for me, it's like it's been a one constant, this show, when there's been a lot of life lived on the edges.
That's right, because a lot will happen in a life in 20
Yeah,
years.
that's
so
true.
it's nice to have that
God.
steady. You talked about rebuilding a little bit professionally in that year that you weren't on air, and then you came back in 2020. Ali Langdon was your co-host. Of course, a little thing called COVID came along.
Yeah.
So again, talk about breaking news and developing stories. I mean, what a time to be, obviously a human being for everyone, but of course working in the media and navigating that sort of broadcast. How was it when you came back?
Well, I wouldn't be back if it wasn't for Ali Langdon. And she is one of my best friends in the world, her and her husband Mike. But if Ali didn't want to work with me, then I wouldn't be back on the Today Show. It was simple as that. And there's some crazy messed up part of Ali that made her think it was a good idea. And I'll be forever grateful for that, because I may not be back doing this, whatever else I would have been doing, I'm not sure. But it was a great thing, and we had an amazing partnership. I admired her so much. We were in the thick of it with COVID, and it was great camaraderie. We were sometimes in that studio and we were the only people, in the whole building.
Yeah.
And then she fell off a surfboard thing. I don't know what they call the wakeboard motorized things, and she hurt her knee.
Injury, yes.
And so she was going through, this terrible pain. She was muscling in, but she was dealing with so much, and she muscled in every day. You can't hold this woman back from doing a job. So out of all that, 3 years with her flew by, and that story was as big as they come. But
Sure
through it
was.
all, she was incredibly professional. We did the Queen's death together, and then a current affair came up, and I said to her, "You got to go for it because of the synergy with Mike Willisey." And she goes, "I hadn't even thought of it." And I said, "You've just got to, because it's such a perfect job for you." And she went for it, and it was sad, but we're still great friends. We see each other all the time, and I love her. I'll love her forever. And fortunately for me, Sarah's again, I'm so fortunate. Every one of the women I've worked with has taught me a huge amount about life and relationships. I think that I'm a much better person for the women I've worked with in many, many ways. And Sarah came up from Melbourne, and I adore her. She's got an incredible backstory herself. But anyone who decides to climb into this job is made of the tough stuff, because you're working with me first up, and I don't know how you do that, because I don't know what's going to happen on any given day. But then you've got the pressures from the outside. Then you've got the brutality of the sleep. And then you've got the mechanics of the job. Like, it's fucking hard. Like, it's really hard, and it's harder on women. And I'm grateful that she's taken to it so well, and she's an incredible broadcaster. And she'll probably leave me at some point too. I'll just be left there on the desk.
Where do you think she would go?
Oh, she can go anywhere. I mean, she's such a talent. And the media landscape is always seeking talent, but I think she's pretty happy where she is.
As you say, Sarah could go anywhere, and of course Sam Armitage came in as a co-host over the summer break.
Yeah.
And as you just said, Karl, the game is harder for women in media, and there's also been speculation, when will Sam be the permanent co-host opposite Karl? And I can imagine that is very difficult for Sarah, for instance, to hear that.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you that when we saw that article, it's not a thing for us, because we're in the job, right? And in this game, there's stuff you have control of, and there's stuff you don't. For us, at any point on any given day, I can be replaced. The show's bigger than I am. In any way, shape, or form, or on any day, I don't see Sarah ever being replaced. It'll be me before that, and I really genuinely feel that I have no interest in working with anyone else, and that's not out of slight, a slight on Sam. I really do love working, with Sarah, and I just won't work with anyone else because it's such a difficult job. There's such a friendship that's built up. There's such trust that's built up, and I've done 20 years, and I don't know about going through all that with another person. At the end of the day, I'm closer to the end than the start, right?
Do you think
That's
so?
the reality. I mean, Koshi started when he was just a few years younger than me, and he went until he was 68. I don't think I'm going to go until I'm 68.
Well, you turned 50 last year, so that's
I've got 18
it's
years to go.
years.
Like I said, I'm closer to the end than the start. TV's TV, but I love working with Sares, and I wish Sam all the very best.
As you say, I mean, you have worked alongside amazing women. We've talked about so many of them, and also the women behind the scenes. And Karl, you spoke out last year when a report was handed down into harassment, bullying, sexual discrimination at Nine. There was an independent review. I'm just trying to find my notes here about what you said, because they were great comments. You said, I want to say it's not about us, because you didn't want to make yourself at the centre of it, but there are good men who do work here at Nine, who find what happened absolutely intolerable, who struggle to understand how we didn't know more and do something, how it grieved you. I feel like we have all in a way let you down. Then you spoke about how much you love working with your colleagues. You called out the women on air, the women on the floor, the women behind the scenes, all of the women that you've worked with in broadcasting. You said women are this company and they're the way forward. They'll show the way. We just have to listen and act, but it's going to be up to all of us now to do better, to say enough. This stops now. Very strong words.
Yeah.
What prompted you to speak up about that? And do you think it's something that you would have spoken up about 10 or 20 years ago?
Well, I didn't stand up for Jess, and that's a regret. I don't want to give a running dialogue on this because I do think, a narrative, because I do think that, as I said, there are a lot of hurt people at Nine, and that pain is theirs, and so I won't talk on behalf of them, but what I will say is that I do honestly believe that Nine is making every effort possible. I think Matt's done a terrific job, the CEO. I think there have been very difficult days there, and there will still be some people who don't feel like enough has been done, but I, from the outside, again, I'm not one of those people who have been directly affected, but I feel like the network has gone through a fundamental change that it needed to, and I think it's on the right path. And in addition to that, I would say that there are enough people now aware, enough checks and balances that have been put in place, that this network is back on the right path. And I really, I love the network. I can't tell you anything else. I mean, God, it's given me the greatest opportunities. But that side of things needs to be handled, and I do believe, and I have faith that now it's made an important change, will continue to, and I think there are enough people protecting the vulnerable now, and I hope that that those people who have gone through pain feel like it is too, and if they don't, there are people there that genuinely they can talk to. So at some point we get on with it, right? And again, that's me saying that, but I feel like there's enough of a safety net now. the network needed to go through a transition. I think that will still evolve, but I feel really comfortable and confident now that the changes that have been made needed to be made, and we're in a good spot.
What was the response to the comments? Because as a society, when these issues come up in any organisation, and outside of media as well, people often say, well, where are the men? Why do the women have to do all the heavy lifting? Why is it only the women talking about this? Where are the male allies? Which is why I wanted to ask you about your decision to speak up. And then the reaction, was it well received with the women that you work with, and importantly also the men that you work with?
I don't really care about anything other than the women who were in pain and who were put through, the things that they've articulated. And I think there are really strong women at the network now who, have their eye out, who have the ear of upstairs. I think the scales have been balanced. I think there's awareness. I think that everything that they set out to do, they have. Doesn't mean there's not, going to be ongoing work to do. But like I said, I'm a full bottle for this. If I see something that or I see someone who's struggling, and I don't need to do anything at the moment, and nor should I. But I think women have been empowered, and I think everyone is in a position now where they're hoping that they can just get on with the work, because the women at the Nine do love working there as well. And every big legacy organisation, I think, is going to have to go through this, and I'm glad that we are, and we'll keep our eye out.
I remember when there was that time where you wore the same suit for, I think it was a year, and you were making a statement. It was after actually Lisa's media lecture, the Oli media lecture, and you were making a statement about the double standards in how women are judged and critiqued on air as opposed to men in terms of what you wear and what you look like. And I remember talking to you about it on air at the time, because you were like, I don't really know why there's been such a big response. And I said, because it's important to hear men talking about these things, because otherwise it's women writing the think pieces, and it's women saying or giving the speeches, which is really important. But it's nice to hear male allies, I think, as the phrase is. Has that been something that you have become more aware of? I don't want to hashtag it as a father, because I don't think that we need to be parents to have empathy or to become aware of different experiences in life, but it certainly helps. I mean, you're a father of 4, 2 sons, 2 daughters. Would you identify as a feminist?
I think I'm just more aware, and again, it's like working with Tracy Grimshaw, who is one of the best journos ever in the world, but also a woman who would fiercely defend herself. I'm not sure whether Tracy would identify as anything in particular in regards to being a feminist or whatever, but she's just who she is, and she knows what she wants, and she knows what she doesn't like. And Lisa was definitely a feminist, but she didn't, I knew where I stood with Lisa, and I could have, really blokey conversations with Lisa, but she would also lean in and go, that's an area where you need to be, you need to be careful, Carlos, or whatever, in a gentle way. And so I feel like dudes, 20 years ago had very little idea, I think, about a brave new world. And I was fortunate to have great mentors along that way, with really formidable, powerful, interesting, funny, loyal women. So it was a great education for me. In terms of now, I just think that I'm much more aware of personal conversations, being aware that I can have a positive influence. I'm there, I can listen, and that's all I can do sometimes. I'm not saying that I'm any, great feminist or anything like that. I'm a kid from Cairns who, is pretty blokey, but I am also aware of being able to have an impact, an important one, if someone needs help. And if I don't have the time to listen, then what sort of bloke am I? And quite often it's just being able to listen and really listen, not listen like a husband. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
Yeah, you know when you're going
yeah.
when dudes are going like that, but it's like really lean in and pay attention. And I think it's beholden upon every man to be a little bit more conscious of it. I'm not going to tell them they have to listen to everything, because I don't. Not everything, but
the stuff about taking the rubbish out, unstack the dishwasher, maybe tune that out. But
just the important stuff,
the big things.
Yeah, and women are incredible, and I owe a great deal of my career to them, and I'm forever thankful.
I was thinking when you were talking earlier about what your family went through with the media intrusion when Harper went missing, and as you say, you had your whole family there, and what they saw. Do you foresee a world where any of your children would consider going into the media, or has everything they've been through turn them off it? Your daughter Ava was featured in Stella a few years ago. She signed with a modelling agency, and we asked her about how she feels about maybe stepping into the spotlight, and she said, well, I see it more as an extension of just my creativity and who I am, but I can only imagine for you, having experienced the full torch of the spotlight and the media glare for 20 years, that must be something that plays on your mind.
I think that the decision, even now for me, at this point in my career, and I feel like I've got a few more years left, is the intrusion worth it, right? And so Harper is now 4.5, nearly 5. Do I want her growing up in that kind of flame-on environment? Has it kind of subsided enough? Are there more benefits that come from being in this incredible job at what I think is a great network? There are other forms of media now where you're not so much in the spotlight. The spotlight, as I said, there's this proliferation of podcasts and digital shows. Would that provide, in any way, shape, or form, less of an intrusion? Not sure. I think I'm probably at a point now where people know me. They can choose to hate me, spit on me, or laugh with me and have a beer. It doesn't worry me, but does it mean the intrusion stops? Probably not. So I'm probably cooked. But what the next few years hold, I don't know. And how I navigate that with the little one, as well as just the rest of life, is something that I'm excited about. I'm not retiring yet. I've got so many school fees still to pay. and it's a
Harper
great privilege.
hasn't even started school yet.
But it's such a privilege to, even to go down to the pub when Harper went missing and people to wrap their arms around you, and it's an enormous privilege, to have got to this point, and it's not something I take lightly. And the responsibility of being a voice for people is only growing in me. I have ambition to tell stories. I have ambition to continue to be true to myself in a broadcast sense. So in a way, I feel like for the first time, I'm just getting started in a complete way. So
I love that answer. Final then question, if you look back at the 20 years, any standout memories and anything? I don't know if you're a person that believes in do-overs. They can't happen, unfortunately. This is not where I bring out the box and go, Carl, we're going to go back and undo this moment. But if you could, is there anything that you wouldn't do?
I don't have any regrets. Honestly, I might have done, some things a little bit differently, but they're not regrets. Because everything that's happened that has led, to some sort of upheaval or a change, I've learned from. I'm pretty relaxed about my weaknesses as a human. There's not much I can do about them. I'm still working on myself, to be, a better husband and father, and I'll continue doing that. You know, some of the greatest things that ever happened to you are really awful at the time, but the lesson is worth it. So I don't want to go out there and go through another pylon.
No. Doesn't mean you want to go through those things, but you will be wiser and stronger at the other side. I don't know. It's
with me. I don't know. Tomorrow I might go on air and, you know, be some clusterfuck that happens and, you know, it's all over. But, you know, I've got a pretty good take on things now. And even when I'm on the wire, walking the wire, and I know I'm on the wire, and it's, you know, I'm going to keep walking it sometimes because I'm fucking crazy.
And that's why we love you.
Maybe.
Carlos, thank you so much for your time. It's been really lovely revisiting these past couple of decades with you. Congratulations, by the way, on the milestone. 50 last year, 20 on the Today Show this year. What's next? I mean, got to be some big milestone around the corner.
I think that's it for the moment. I'm just going to go home and have a sleep. I can't tell you how much I love bed. Like, it's such a beautiful feeling. And the one thing I do have, which people are going to think I'm an absolute wanker for, I have these linen sheets, right? What are you laughing for? No, I have these linen sheets that I put on, you know, and when they've been washed and they smell lovely, and I climb into bed on Monday night to go to sleep, and I just put the linen on my face, and I'm asleep in 2 seconds. I don't know if there's a better feeling in this world than linen sheets and sleep.
And then how do you feel when the alarm goes off? Do you still have to get woken up by the alarm, or is it and you're wrenched away from those linen sheets?
I get up. I often wake up like 15 minutes before and I'm up. Once I'm up, I'm up. It's time to crack on. And I actually love the early mornings.
Really?
You know, I love it.
Would you have expected to say that 20 years ago when David Gingell called you?
No. That's right.
Yeah.
It's the best time of day. It's the first crack at news. It's the first crack at opinion. You're not relying on anyone else. You're relying on yourself to make judgment calls that you think and hope are the right ones for a viewer. What a privilege.
Thank you. It's been a privilege talking to you. Thanks for making a judgment call to sit down in conversation with me on the Stellar podcast. Karl Stefanovic, ladies and gentlemen, and you can, of course, catch Karl on the Today Show on weekdays, maybe for another 20 years. Watch his space. We'll just stay on the current 20 years. Thanks again, Karl.
Pleasure, Seth.